I'm Anne McMillan, and this video is for autistics who want successful adult intimate relationships. I am going to give you the top 10 things that you need to know in order to achieve that desire. Please hit subscribe, and when you subscribe, please write "I subscribed" in the comment, and I will do my very best to reply to every one of you. So let's get into it. Here are my top 10 tips for autistics wanting successful adult intimate relationships. I'm going to start with tip number 10 and work my way all the way to tip number 1, the most important thing that you can do to maintain successful adult intimate relationships. Tip number 10, acknowledge that you have autism. Hopefully, if you're watching this video, you are already acknowledging that you are autistic. I love autistic people. They have been in my life all of my life. I have better relationships with some of them than with others of them. And one thing that makes relationships with autistic people the most successful is when they acknowledge that they have autism and when they acknowledge that along with their autism comes some strengths and some vulnerabilities. So acknowledging your strengths and acknowledging your vulnerabilities is part of acknowledging the reality of your autism. We're all that way. I am not autistic, but I also have strengths and vulnerabilities, and I need to accept both of them. And through accepting them and doing my best to put my best foot forward, I can really succeed. And it's the same for autistic people. You do have autism. There are some strengths that come along with your autism, and there are also some vulnerabilities. Acknowledge them. Tip number 9, be aware that this is new to the world of psychology. Intelligent, adult, autistic people wanting to be in intimate adult relationships is on the frontier of psychology, and there isn't much research about it. And you are going to hear a lot of things from a lot of people that may or may not be true because not much has been proven. So keep that in mind. Remember that not everything that you are going to hear all of the time is right. And please apply those critical thinking skills to what I'm sharing with you too. Tip number 8, be aware of anyone who is claiming right now that they can fix your neurodiverse relationship. Fix. It's important to really be grateful for all of the great work that many of us are doing to try to best support this population, both neurotypicals and autistics, in neurodiverse relationships. And because there has been so little research, there is no evidence-based treatment for neurodiverse marriages. And a lot of the time we want to go and find some magic solution, or we feel like the professional world is going to be there for us to help us and give us that magic pill. And as history has taught us, that's not always true. And especially here in this frontier of psychology. So that means you just don't have to listen to everything that everybody says. Be aware that even though there are all of these great resources out there, there's all of this great neurodiverse couples counseling, that we're just at the beginning of this journey of trying to figure out how to best support everyone in these neurodiverse relationships. And that means that you may not get the results that you want simply by going to neurodiverse couples counseling, simply by taking the immediate advice that is in your environment. Tip number 7, and this is a big one. Don't mask so that you can get married and check off a social box because everyone else is doing it. The neurotypicals out there are getting married. This is what they want. This is what you see them do. They have this beautiful ritual. They have this wedding day. And that might be the best thing for you to do too. It really might. Only you know what's best for you. But don't do it just to check off a social box, just to be like everyone else. I know, or at least I understand based on what you tell me, that masking takes a lot of energy and that you're working so hard to be like the neurotypicals around you all of the time. And that might take you to a place where you feel like it's a good idea to also mask and get married to check off that social box. But that's not a reason to get married. There are lots of better things to do with your life and your time and your love and your energy than get married just because the people around you are doing it. if you get married, if you make that decision, make sure you do it because it's the right thing for you, not because it's part of your masking. Tip number 6 might surprise you. This one is, don't seek out those really, really, really nice neurotypicals who are super understanding and super empathetic as partners. And the reason why is that neurotypicals who are super empathetic also have a very, very high level of something that I call body empathy. And that means that they are going to be super attuned to you and super attuned to your body and super attuned to the stresses in the relationship. And that the fact that they have such a high level of body empathy might be one of the things that really becomes a problem in your relationship later. So when you seek it out in the beginning, because it seems so comforting in the beginning to have this really, really super empathetic person who's at your side and seems to understand you, that may be the same thing that ends up making the relationship fail later. So just don't go looking for those partners. Don't go target them as caretakers for you, because they might not be the best caretaker anyway, long term. And also because a marriage isn't about caretaking. You, to be happy, needs to find someone who isn't going to be a caretaker, but who is going to be a compatible partner for other reasons. And that is not as likely, at least in my opinion. Again, there's no research. Like I said, we need more research. But at least in my opinion, you'll probably be happier if you choose someone else long term. Tip number 5, be aware that for neurotypicals, their brain is connecting to you all the time. Something's happening in their brain that isn't happening as much in yours, that causes some of their neurons to fire every time they see you take very, very small actions. So you might do the smallest thing, like lift an eyebrow or lift your cheek in a certain way, and your neurotypical partner's brain is going to be firing because you did those teeny, teeny little things. And it's not really going to make any sense to you, but they are going to be having emotional reactions based on those teeny little movements of your face. Now, I'm not saying this because I want you to start worrying more about all of the different faces you might be making, because that sounds overwhelming. And I know that you're already working so hard to manage the fact that neurotypicals are so sensitive to these things. So I'm just bringing this up so that you can be aware that that really is happening in neurotypical's brain all of the time. And it's very, very real to them. It's a very, very big part of the way their brain works. And that explains some of their emotional reactions, which might not make sense to you. And I understand that it's confusing. And that goes back to accepting your strengths and your vulnerabilities. This really is something that neurotypical brains are doing. It has an important impact on their ability to socialize and understand other people's perspectives. And their brain is not going to stop doing it. They can't stop their brain from continually connecting to your body, because that's just what their brain does. And interacting with autistic people can be confusing to them because their brain is trying to connect to you in this way, and it's not working the same way that it would if you were both neurotypical. So that makes them very, very confused. So keep in mind that they are confused too, and they probably don't know why. And their body and their brain is connecting to yours all of the time, and they can't stop it. And that explains some of their emotional reactions to what's happening in your intimate relationship. Tip number 4, when you see your intimate partner hurting in some way, whether it's if they're physically hurt or they're having an emotional reaction, remember that they need support in that moment. And remember that you, as an autistic person, might also be reacting to their emotions because you have something that I call affect sharing. And when someone else is hurting, you probably feel a lot of stress and anxiety associated with that hurt. And that might take you to a meltdown place. And what happens if your intimate partner is in a lot of pain or is having a lot of emotional stress, and that affect sharing happens, and you then also react in emotional pain and emotional stress, then your partner isn't getting the support that they need. And when your partner is hurt or something awful is happening, they need support. And you responding emotionally in a way that's maybe more like a meltdown or that's more about you, instead of giving them that support, really ends a lot of these relationships. So if your partner is hurting, whether it's physically or emotionally, remember that it's a time of support and that either you can give them that support, or if you don't feel like you can give them that support, maybe leave. Instead of allowing their emotions to trigger some other strong emotions in you, what isn't helpful in these relationships is when the neurotypical needs support and the autistic person, instead of giving that support or leaving, the autistic person has their own emotional reaction. And then the neurotypical feels like it's their duty to put aside their own hurt and emotions to take care of the autistic person. And some of these really great, caring neurotypicals who are really empathetic can do that for a while. But at some point, these relationships don't succeed because they, in their moments of hurt and pain, find themselves taking care of their autistic partner's reaction to their hurt and pain rather than getting the support that they need. And that just doesn't work for them long term. So remember, if your partner needs support, make sure they find that support one way or another. Tip number 3, it is not okay if your neurotypical partner is getting after you all the time and telling you that what you are doing is wrong all of the time and telling you how much they don't like your autism all of the time. That is unacceptable. You were born with your brain and you are going to be autistic. Now, that doesn't mean that the two of you can't find a way to work together, and hopefully that can happen, and hopefully we will find more and more solutions to make this work as well as possible in your relationship. But one thing that doesn't work is being in a relationship with a neurotypical who just can't accept you for who you are. And here are the deets on what happens with neurotypicals. They figure out that their partner has autism, and they go through this process in which they come to the realization that they're missing something from their intimate partner that they really, really want. And then they feel guilty about wanting it, and they feel like they're a bad person for wanting it. And so they decide that since they're a bad person and they shouldn't really want what they really do want, they try to suppress those wants and those emotions and really, really focus on the things that they love about you. And then for some of them, they're not able to do that consistently. And so when they're upset or something else goes wrong, then they start getting upset with you about your autism again. And then they feel guilty again. And then they're really nice to you again because they know that they shouldn't be upset about your autism again. And then something goes wrong and they feel upset and they get after you about your autism again. And it turns into this cycle that's not healthy for either of you. You don't have to put up with being in a situation where half of the time your partner is really happy about who you are and what's going on. And then the other half of the time, your partner is telling you that they don't like your autism. Like, you didn't choose this. This is your brain. It's who you are. So you don't need to stick around in a relationship where you're being treated like that. Tip number 2, acknowledge that the neurotypical's brains around you are doing something that your brain isn't doing. The neurotypicals have information about how the social world works that you don't have access to. So that means that they have, in many cases, a more accurate understanding of what is going on in social situations. Accept this reality, accept this difference, and to be successful, ask for reality checks. Have someone that you can go to get a reality check so that you can have the best information possible to make the best decisions possible for your life. And if you are only relying on an autistic brain to make those decisions, then you are really missing a lot of important information, and you will probably make decisions that won't have as good of outcomes as they would have had if you had decided to go ask a neurotypical for a reality check about a certain situation. And have someone you can really trust to tell you the truth, because you know that neurotypicals, they often will just say what people want to hear, right? They just say it to be nice, to be social. That's not going to help you. You need a neurotypical friend who really wants you to succeed and really has your best interests in mind. Because the way that you're really going to succeed is if you really have all of the real information about what's going on so you can make the best decision for you. Find that neurotypical, one that you can really trust to tell you the straight truth. And tip number 1, the most important tip: don't use shame or control or force. It's really frustrating because neurotypicals use all of these social gestures and cues and smiles and connection in order to get what we want out of each other. And sure, that could also be defined as a kind of control. It's just a different kind of control that neurotypicals are using that most of us wouldn't call control. Most of us would use different words to describe it, like socializing or working together or give and take or collaborating or cooperating. We would have all of these different words for how we are interacting socially to get the things that we want done. In your case, it's hard to be part of that at the same degree that the neurotypicals are part of it, because the part of your brain that would be helping you do this isn't working in the same way the neurotypicals' brains are working. So sometimes autistic people respond to that situation by using force or control or sometimes shame to try and get what they want. And if you do that in an intimate relationship, you're pretty much destroying the relationship. You can't have the connection and peace and love that you really want if your partner is feeling controlled and shamed and forced. Your neurotypical partner does have a different way of getting what they want and moving forward through relationship dynamics and conflicts. And if the two of you talk about these differences, there's a possibility that you might gain some insight into why force and shame and control aren't going to get you what you want long term in an intimate relationship. And you can start finding some skills that will help you be more successful so that you can get what you want. Because I would really love to be with all of you as we look at this situation realistically and find ways to move these relationships forward without the neurotypical continuing to accommodate and the autistic person continuing to mask and mask and mask. Because that's already what you've been doing in your relationships, and it's not really working for either partner. I am Ann McMillan from neurodiversemarriage.com. Again, please subscribe. Write "I subscribed" in the comments. I will do my best to respond. And I will be back here to give you regular content and information about neurodiverse communication. Talk to you soon.